It's one of Gibraltar's natural wonders and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There's no summer respite here, as work is non-stop at the Gorham and Vanguard Cave complex.
For 40,000 years, a cave remained sealed, hidden from the world and untouched by human hands. Time passed, civilizations rose and fell, yet the entrance stayed silent and forgotten.
So they're more into the bones and, how to put bones together, what animals these bones come from and so on. So pretty varied team. Understand, we work with about...
When scientists finally opened the cave, they expected dust, stone, and maybe a few ancient bones. Instead, what they discovered inside stunned everyone and changed how we see the distant past. How could something survive untouched for so long? What exactly was hiding inside that ancient cave? Join us as we uncover the mind-blowing discovery found inside a cave sealed for 40,000 years. Hidden chamber of the last Neanderthals. The discovery began after 9 long years of careful excavation. During this time, archaeologists worked patiently inside Vanguard Cave, removing layer after layer of ancient sediment. The project was led by Professor Clive Finlay from the Gibraltar National Museum, a scholar widely recognized for his deep knowledge of Neanderthal behavior. His team approached the cave with extreme care, slowly uncovering its hidden history. Each section of soil was examined with precision because even the smallest detail could reveal something important about the past. As the team moved deeper into the cave, they reached one of its most remote areas. There, they encountered something that immediately caught their attention. A dense barrier of sand blocked the passage ahead. This barrier was unusual. It was not made of fallen rock or natural geological debris. Instead, it was made entirely of compacted sand. The sand was ancient and tightly packed, forming a solid seal that had remained untouched for an incredibly long period of time. This discovery stopped the excavation team in their tracks. The sand appeared perfectly preserved, suggesting that it had not been disturbed since the time when Neanderthals still lived along this coastline. The realization alone was enough to make the moment extraordinary. The team understood that if the sand had truly remained untouched for so long, then anything hidden behind it could provide a direct glimpse into a distant chapter of human history. When the team finally removed the sand, they uncovered something remarkable. Behind the sealed passage was a chamber carved into the roof of the cave. The space measured about 13 meters in size and reached roughly 42 feet deep. Most astonishing of all, the chamber had been completely sealed from the outside world for at least 40,000 years. This detail alone carried enormous meaning. The sand that had blocked the entrance was at least as old as the disappearance of the last Neanderthals. That meant everything inside the chamber had remained exactly as it was when it was last entered. Every object, every bone, every mark on the walls had been preserved in total darkness for tens of thousands of years. To understand the importance of this moment, it helps to consider the timeline of human history. 40,000 years ago was long before modern humans created the famous cave paintings in France and Spain. It was long before the development of agriculture. It was long before the rise of cities and organized civilizations. It was even before the development of language in the form we understand today. The chamber represented a sealed moment from a world that existed before many of the milestones that shaped human society. It was an untouched space, frozen in time since the final era of the Neanderthals. For archaeologists, discoveries like this are incredibly rare. Most archaeological sites are disturbed many times over the centuries. Natural forces, animals, or human activity often alter them. But this chamber was different. It had remained completely isolated. The team realized they were about to study a space that had not been entered for 40,000 years. When the archaeologists finally broke through into the chamber, they did not find treasure in the usual sense. Instead, they discovered something far more important for understanding the ancient past. The first items identified on the surface were animal remains. Among them were bones belonging to a lynx, a spotted hyena, and a griffon vulture. These 3 species are known as powerful predators or scavengers. Each of them occupies a high position in the natural food chain. What made the discovery unusual was the fact that the bones of these animals had been found together inside a sealed chamber high within the cave. In the natural world, these animals do not gather together in the same place. They do not share dens or living spaces. Each species normally follows its own patterns of movement and hunting. Because of this, their bones appearing together in such a location raised serious questions. The animals had not naturally gathered in that chamber. Something, or someone, had brought them there. The chamber contained another puzzling feature as well. The limestone walls showed deep scratch marks. These marks appeared to have been made by the claws of a carnivorous animal. The grooves were strong and clearly visible, carved directly into the stone surface. These marks suggested that at some point, a powerful animal had been inside the chamber. The scratches were not random. They indicated that the creature had been moving along the walls, leaving clear traces of its presence. Researchers are still working to understand what kind of animal created them and why it had been inside the sealed room. However, one particular discovery inside the chamber provided the first clear sign of human involvement. Among the predator bones and the mysterious claw marks, the team found a large whelk. A whelk is a type of edible sea snail that normally lives in coastal waters. The shell had been found at the very back of the chamber, far away from the cave entrance. This location was extremely significant. The chamber itself was positioned deep inside the cave, far from the shoreline. The nearest beach lay about 20 meters away from the cave's interior. Whelks cannot travel on land over long distances. They do not climb into caves or move across rocky terrain on their own. The presence of the shell in that location made one thing clear. It had been carried there. Someone had taken the whelk from the Mediterranean coast and brought it into the deepest part of the cave. The age of the chamber indicated that this action happened more than 40,000 years ago. Because of the time period involved, there is only one possible group responsible for this action. The people who carried the sea snail into the chamber must have been Neanderthals. This single shell became one of the most meaningful clues discovered during the excavation. It showed that the chamber had been entered deliberately by Neanderthals. They had traveled from the coastline into the cave, bringing food with them and placing it inside the protected interior space. The presence of the whelk suggested that these ancient humans were not simply surviving without thought or planning. Instead, they were making clear decisions about how to use their environment. They transported resources from the coast into the cave and placed them in specific locations. This action revealed a level of organization and intention that challenges many earlier ideas about Neanderthal life. For much of the 20th century, scientific understanding often portrayed Neanderthals as primitive beings with limited abilities. They were frequently described as struggling to survive, lacking the capacity for planning or structured behavior. The discovery inside Vanguard Cave tells a very different story. The advanced knowledge revealed. The sealed chamber discovered within the cave system has added another powerful piece of evidence. This discovery has created serious questions about the traditional model of human evolution. The model that once seemed clear now struggles to explain what researchers are actually finding in the ground. For decades, excavations at the Gorham's Cave complex have continued to produce discoveries that force scientists to rethink their earlier conclusions. Each new layer of evidence shows that Neanderthals were far more capable than the outdated stereotypes suggested. The sealed chamber is only the most recent example of how the site continues to reshape the discussion. Yet even this dramatic discovery was not the most surprising evidence to come from the area. Another revelation, found within the nearby Vanguard Cave, proved to be even more striking. Deep beneath the sealed chamber, archaeologists uncovered layers of material that stretch back through thousands of years. These layers act like pages in a long and previously unknown history. As researchers carefully studied these deposits, they began to notice signs of behavior that were far more complex than anyone once expected from Neanderthals. The evidence was not simple or accidental. Instead, it pointed toward careful planning, technical knowledge, and repeated use of specific methods. Over time, the excavations built a growing collection of proof that Neanderthals possessed skills that scientists had rarely associated with them in the past. The findings were so detailed and unusual that many researchers found themselves struggling to decide how best to classify this behavior. One of the most important pieces of evidence came in the year 2024. During that year, an international group of scientists published a study describing a remarkable feature discovered within the cave deposits. The structure dated back approximately 60,000 years. The discovery was a pit-like hearth that had clearly been engineered by Neanderthals for a specific purpose. It was not simply a fire used for warmth or cooking. The design showed that it had been built to produce plant tar, which served as a form of glue. This revelation was extremely important. 60,000 years ago, Neanderthals were carrying out a controlled manufacturing process to create a useful adhesive. The work took place inside a cave located along the edge of the Mediterranean region. The structure itself showed clear signs of careful design. It was built as a circular hearth, with 2 channels and a thick wall lining. These features were not random. They allowed plant fragments to be heated in a controlled way without direct exposure to open air. This process is known as pyrolysis. Through this method, heat causes plant material to release sticky resin. The resin collects as a thick substance that can later be used as glue. Creating this material requires the correct balance of heat and air, meaning the process must be managed carefully. The Neanderthals who built the hearth clearly understood how to achieve this balance. Their design allowed them to heat plant fragments while limiting oxygen, making it possible to draw out the resin trapped inside the plants. Another important detail appears when researchers compare this discovery to similar technologies used by Neanderthals living in colder regions. In those areas, Neanderthals often produced adhesive from birch bark. However, the environment around the Mediterranean coast did not provide the same materials. Instead of relying on birch, the Neanderthals, living near the Gorham's Cave complex, adapted their technique to the resources available in their own environment. They used gum rock rose, a shrub that grows naturally in the Mediterranean landscape. By using this local plant, they were able to produce the same sticky substance needed for their tools. This shows that they were not simply repeating one method everywhere they lived. They were able to adjust their technology depending on the resources around them. The tar produced from the plant material served an important role in their hunting equipment. Once the resin was prepared, it was used to attach sharp stone points onto wooden shafts. This process created composite spears that were strong and reliable. Composite tools are made from multiple parts that work together as a single object. In this case, the stone tip, the wooden shaft, and the plant-based adhesive all combine to form a weapon suitable for hunting animals across the coastal plains outside the cave. The presence of these spears suggests that Neanderthals hunted in the open landscape stretching beyond the cave entrance. Reliable weapons would have been essential for success in such an environment. The adhesive ensured that the stone points remained firmly attached during use. This entire process reveals an impressive level of technical knowledge. Creating plant tar through pyrolysis requires planning, control of heat, and an understanding of how materials change under specific conditions. These steps cannot be achieved by accident. The Neanderthals responsible for this work clearly knew how to produce the glue intentionally. They constructed a specialized hearth, gathered the correct plant material, and controlled the heating process to release the resin. Such actions demonstrate a clear form of problem-solving. The goal was to create a substance capable of binding stone and wood together. Achieving that result required several steps that had to be performed in the right order. This kind of behavior does not match the long-standing stereotype of Neanderthals as intellectually inferior beings. Instead, the evidence suggests people who could experiment, observe results, and refine their methods. The creation of adhesive also indicates knowledge that likely developed over long periods of time. Skills such as these rarely appear suddenly. They usually grow through repeated attempts, shared experience, and careful observation. The discovery therefore highlights another important element of Neanderthal life. It suggests that knowledge could be passed from one individual to another, and from one generation to the next. When a complex process like glue production continues for thousands of years, it implies that members of the group were teaching each other how to perform it. Younger individuals would need to learn the correct steps, the right materials, and the proper structure of the hearth. The remarkable evidence from Gorham's Cave. The process of heating materials in a controlled environment with very low oxygen in order to produce tar is not something that could happen by chance. It is not a simple action that someone could discover by accident while experimenting for a short time. This type of process requires knowledge, patience, and careful understanding. It involves controlling heat and oxygen levels in a precise way. Such a method cannot appear suddenly in one generation through simple trial and error. Instead, this knowledge must grow slowly over time. It requires people to learn from each other and to pass information from one generation to the next. The older and more experienced members of a group must teach the younger ones carefully and deliberately. Skills like this only survive when knowledge is shared and preserved inside a community. This shows that the people who practiced this process were capable of learning, teaching, and maintaining complex traditions. The remarkable survival of the site itself happened because of a natural event. A fast-moving sand dune swept across the area and sealed the site completely. When this sand covered the location, it also trapped pollen and spores from plants that existed in the surrounding environment. These tiny particles remained preserved inside the layers of sand and soil. Because of this sealing process, the site became something extraordinary. It turned into a natural time capsule. The layers preserved a clear picture of the outside world exactly as it was at the moment when the site was buried. This means that scientists can study the preserved material and understand what the environment looked like at that specific time in history. In a powerful way, this preserved moment captured the knowledge and activities of an entire culture. It recorded how people lived, what they ate, and what skills they practiced. The sand dune sealed this evidence at the exact moment when that culture was close to disappearing from the earth forever. When all the evidence from Gorham's cave is carefully examined together, it creates a much larger and clearer picture of Neanderthal life. The layers of discarded material, often called trash layers, found in both Gorham's cave and Vanguard cave, contain a wide range of remains. These layers are packed with shells from shellfish, as well as bones from fish, monk seals, and dolphins. These animals did not arrive inside the caves naturally. They were brought there by the Neanderthals themselves. Careful examination of the bones and shells reveals clear-cut marks made by stone tools. These marks show that the animals were deliberately processed. The evidence shows that the food was not simply eaten in a rough or careless way. Instead, the animals were carefully cut, divided into portions, and prepared for eating. This means that meals were organized and planned. Food preparation took place in a structured and thoughtful manner. The Neanderthals, who lived in Gibraltar,
We're here on the southern tip of Gibraltar's famous rock, heading to a place called Gorham's Cave, once the home of our early ancestors. When you walk here, can you imagine Neanderthals living here tens of thousands of years ago?
Absolutely.
were not simply scavenging leftovers from the environment. They were actively collecting marine resources and bringing them back to the caves. Once inside the caves, they prepared the food in organized ways. This behavior also shows something important about how they used their living spaces. Their domestic areas were arranged around reliable routines of food preparation. The caves were not random shelters where people simply passed through. They were structured living spaces where daily activities were carried out in organized ways. The environment around the caves during the Ice Age was very different from what exists today. At that time, sea levels were much lower than they are now. Because of this difference, the coastline looked completely different. Research shows that Neanderthals standing at the entrance of the cave would not have seen the shoreline that exists today. Instead, they would have looked out across a wide open coastal shelf. This land stretched approximately 4.5 kilometers outward into what is now part of the Mediterranean Sea. This vast area was not empty land. It was a rich and diverse landscape. It included large sand dunes, woodlands filled with stone pine trees, seasonal lakes, and a wide variety of wildlife. The amount of wildlife in this environment was extraordinary. Researchers have described the area as something similar to a Mediterranean version of the Serengeti because of the abundance of animals living there. However, this entire landscape no longer exists above water today.
Back when Neanderthals lived here, the rock was surrounded by a beach. Over 40,000 years of wind blowing sand into the caves and rising sea levels trapped the artifacts inside.
The coastal shelf that once supported forests, lakes, and wildlife is now completely submerged beneath the Mediterranean Sea. The Neanderthals who lived in these caves witnessed this dramatic environmental change slowly unfolding over many generations. As time passed, the sea level continued to rise. Little by little, the land that once served as their hunting ground disappeared under the water. This change did not happen suddenly. Instead, it unfolded slowly over thousands of years. For the people living there, it would have been a long and gradual environmental crisis. Generation after generation would have watched the landscape shrink as the sea continued to move closer. Despite all the fascinating discoveries from the caves, one finding inside Gorham's cave stands above all the others. Deeper inside the main cave, researchers made a discovery that challenged one of the most important assumptions about human evolution. This discovery was later published in the scientific journal known as the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. In this publication, researchers announced something extraordinary. They had found the first confirmed example of an abstract engraving created by Neanderthals. The engraving appears as a pattern carved directly into the bedrock floor of the cave. The design consists of deep lines arranged in a cross-hatching pattern. Scientific analysis shows that this engraving was created more than 39,000 years ago. The pattern is not the result of a random scratch. It is not a groove created by sharpening tools. It is also not the result of a natural geological process. Scientists conducted experiments to understand how the pattern could have been made. By recreating the engraving process, they discovered something important. Most of the lines in the design were made by repeatedly passing a sharp stone tool across the same grooves. This process required careful control and steady effort. In total, at least 54 separate strokes were needed to complete the pattern. Each line had to be carved deliberately and carefully. This means the engraving was not created quickly or casually. It required focus, persistence, and a clear intention. The pattern represents a sustained and purposeful act of creation. Later research by Professor Clive Finlayson and his team revealed the deeper significance of this discovery. For many decades, scientists believed that the creation of painted or engraved designs on cave walls marked a special moment in human history. This moment was considered the point when Homo sapiens developed the mental ability for symbolic thought. Symbolic thought allows humans to represent ideas, patterns, or meanings through physical symbols or images. Because of this belief, the creation of cave art was seen as the defining achievement that separated modern humans from all other ancient human relatives. It was considered the moment when our ancestors became fully human in the modern sense. However, the engraving found in Gorham's cave challenges that long-standing idea completely. The evidence shows that Neanderthals living in Gibraltar were already creating deliberate abstract patterns at least 39,000 years ago. At that time, modern humans had not yet arrived in this region of Europe. This means that Neanderthals were capable of producing abstract designs long before Homo sapiens appeared there. The pattern carved into the cave floor is clearly an intentional, abstract design. The age of the engraving also confirms an important fact. It is more than 39,000 years old, which places its creation at a time when no modern humans were present anywhere near Gibraltar. The implications of this discovery are extremely important. The ability to create abstract designs demonstrates the presence of abstract thinking. Abstract thinking allows a person to imagine patterns, ideas, or symbols that do not exist physically in the environment. For many years, scientists believed this ability belonged only to our species. It was considered the key explanation for why Homo sapiens survived while Neanderthals eventually disappeared. This belief was used to explain the supposed advantages that modern humans held over other human relatives. Symbolic thought was seen as the reason our species developed complex culture and advanced technology. However, the evidence from Gorham's cave presents a very different picture. The discoveries in the cave layers show that Neanderthals were capable of many behaviors once thought to belong only to modern humans. The evidence suggests that they hunted birds and marine animals for food. They used feathers for decoration. They created abstract engravings in rock surfaces. These behaviors demonstrate symbolic thinking, creativity, and cultural expression. They also reveal advanced practical skills such as building composite tools, organizing domestic food preparation, and using marine resources effectively. The new understanding of Neanderthal life. The discoveries at the Gorham's Cave complex in Gibraltar have deeply challenged many long-held beliefs about Neanderthals. For a long time, scientists believed that Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago, shortly after modern humans arrived in Europe. This idea remained widely accepted for many years. However, the archaeological evidence found in Gibraltar now suggests that the story may be very different. Artifacts discovered in the caves indicate that Neanderthals may have survived in this location much later than once believed. The materials uncovered at the site suggest that Neanderthals were still living in the area between about 33,000 and 24,000 years ago. If this evidence is correct, it means that some Neanderthal populations may have continued to exist for as long as 16,000 years, after the time scientists once believed they had already vanished from Earth. This finding changes the timeline of human history in a remarkable way. It suggests that the last Neanderthals may have lived in Gibraltar during the same period when early modern humans were already forming complex societies across Europe. These two groups may have lived closer to each other in time and space than many researchers once imagined. Gibraltar sits beside the narrow Strait of Gibraltar, a small stretch of water that separates Europe from North Africa. This location raises an important question. It is possible that Neanderthals and modern humans lived within reach of each other across this narrow passage of water. Because of this possibility, archaeologists now face many important questions about the final thousands of years of Neanderthal existence. Researchers continue to explore whether these groups may have encountered each other in different ways. Some scholars wonder whether there was contact between them. Others ask whether there may have been conflict or competition. Another possibility is that the two groups may have interbred at certain points in time. There is also the chance that environmental changes played the largest role, slowly pushing Neanderthals out of the habitats they once depended on. One major environmental change that scientists consider is the steady rise of sea levels after the Ice Age. As the climate warmed, oceans expanded, and coastlines slowly moved inland. Coastal hunting grounds that once supported Neanderthal communities may have gradually disappeared under rising water. If Neanderthals relied heavily on these coastal resources, the loss of this environment could have played a powerful role in their final disappearance. Standing at the entrance of Vanguard Cave today offers a powerful moment of reflection. The cave looks out over the wide blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea. When people stand at this place now, they can imagine that tens of thousands of years ago, a Neanderthal individual once stood in almost the same position. That person may have returned from the nearby beach carrying a whelk shell. They may have prepared fish using a stone knife. They may have created adhesive tar in a carefully controlled hearth. They may also have carved abstract patterns into the hard dolomite bedrock, leaving behind marks whose meanings are still not fully understood today. One of the most remarkable discoveries from the site is the sealed chamber inside Vanguard Cave.
We've always felt that Vanguard Cave, which had been sealed long before any of us went down to the cave, about 40,000 years ago, that it continued much further and much deeper than we had originally thought.
For thousands of years, this chamber remained hidden and undisturbed. Now that archaeologists have opened it, its contents are slowly being studied with great care. Each fragment recovered from the chamber is carefully labeled, recorded, and examined. These pieces form a detailed record of the lives of the people who once used this space. Professor Finlayson, who has played an important role in the research at the Gibraltar Caves, has explained that the discoveries made so far represent only the beginning of what the site may reveal. The chamber itself is only the first layer of a much deeper history. Beneath the chamber floor lie many layers of sediment that researchers have not yet fully explored. These layers contain a continuous record of Neanderthal life, stretching back tens of thousands of years beyond what has already been uncovered. During excavation, every bucket of soil removed from the site is carefully screened through a grid. This slow and detailed process allows archaeologists to recover even the smallest fragments of bone, stone tools, or shells. Each piece has the potential to provide new information about how Neanderthals lived. Any single discovery could add another important detail that forces scientists to reconsider long-standing ideas about human evolution. For scientists, this careful work is like slowly turning the pages of a very old and fragile book. Every new layer uncovered reveals another part of a story that has remained hidden for tens of thousands of years. The caves of Gibraltar may hold some of the final chapters in the history of the Neanderthals. As research continues, these caves remind us that human history is far more complex than once believed. The story of the Neanderthals is no longer simply about disappearance. Instead, it is becoming a deeper story about survival, adaptation, and the long shared journey of different human groups across ancient landscapes. And deep beneath the quiet stone floors of these caves, the past still waits patiently. With every careful brush of sand and every fragment lifted from the earth, archaeologists move one step closer to understanding the final moments of a human species that once stood on the same shores and looked out at the same sea we see today. What do you think about discoveries in this long, sealed cave? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before you go, be sure to click on the video shown on your screen.